From icons who were poorly handled, to diamonds that were treated like anything but. These wrestlers all likely regretted joining WWE. So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 wrestlers who should never have signed with WWE. Number 10, EC3. EC3 seems like the very acme of a Vince McMahon guy. Good looking, muscled, and a strong enough talker to handle the sports entertainment rigours of WWE TV. But his time in WWE is best known for looking grumpy while toting a red Solo cup. Apparently this was punishment booking because, as a babyface, he wasn't cheered over soon-to-depart fan favourite Dean Ambrose on house shows. The worst of it is that EC3's most recent run with WWE was not his first go on the sports entertainment merry-go-round. He appeared on the 4th and 5th season of NXT in its original game show format as Derek Bateman. Remember him? He stayed with the brand as it transitioned into both a developmental territory and WWE's most acclaimed show. But after an underwhelming run, he was released from the company in 2013. This release was arguably the making of him though. He managed to go to TNA and make himself a star under his new gimmick as the top 1%. Twice TNA Heavyweight Champion and Impact Grand Champion, he earned himself another shot at the big leagues. However, that second attempt to be a WWE superstar did not go too well in the end, and he was ultimately released from the company again in April 2020. So much for that. Number 9, Buff Bagwell. Buff Bagwell has a mixed legacy from his time in WCW. A 5-time WCW Tag Team Champion and former NWO member. His name is, on the other hand, forever linked to the Judy Bagwell on a pole match. Yeah, this prime slice of peak Vince Russo madness saw Buff fighting Canyon to save his mother, who was perched upon a forklift truck. What a time to be alive, eh? Still, when WCW folded, he'd done enough to be fondly remembered by fans. Bagwell clearly felt he had more to give, however, and a shot at WWE superstardom beckoned. Buff became one of only a few WCW stars to take a pay cut and accept a buyout on his AOL Time Warner contract. But this superficially admirable move would prove to be misjudged. Buff made his WWE television debut on July 2nd, 2001, and Bagwell faced Booker T in an infamous Raw main event, which saw fans reject the pair of WCW wrestlers they had been trained for years to see as inferior and the enemy. Now, Booker would go on to fare much better in WWE with time. Bagwell, though, was released a week later. Yikes. He'd have been better off sitting at home just letting his contract run down, really. Right, speaking of people signing with WWE, I want to know right now, what star do you want to see sign for WWE in the next year? Let me know in the comments. Number 8, Terry Taylor. So in any discussion of wrestling's worst gimmicks, you'll likely see mention of WWE's new generation and Vince McMahon's obsession with occupational gimmicks. He filled his promotion with wrestling dentists and bin men and so on, and few of these left much lasting impression. Supernatural gimmicks are also notoriously tricky to get right. For every The Undertaker, there have been a dozen misfiring Papa Shangos. Another thing to avoid, should you find yourself in control of the world's largest wrestling company at some point, is asking a guy to wear a dyed red mohawk and make him crow like a cockerel. Yeah, not the best shout. Solid between the ropes and easy on the eye, Terry Taylor was a babyface star across various territories in the 80s, before Vince McMahon saddled him with the Red Rooster gimmick, crowing and flapping his arms like wings to taunt opponents. He was also portrayed as an idiot who could only wrestle under the instruction of manager Bobby Heenan. All of this would be baffling, but for the knowledge that the Red Rooster gimmick was landed on Taylor as a rib, because he was an office stooge with massive backstage heat. Underwhelming stints in WCW followed, plus a second brief WWE run as terrific Terry Taylor. Look, he's no doubt happy in his ongoing backstage role with the company, But Taylor remains best known for the awful rooster gimmick, never fulfilling his in-ring potential. Number 7, Scott Steiner. A ridiculous, muscle-covered, charismatic force of nature. Big Papa Pump, Freakzilla, the big bad booty daddy. However you want to put it, Scott Steiner had transformed himself into a WCW singles star since wrestling for WWF as one half of the Steiner brothers in the early 90s. Unlike others on this list, when McMahon bought WCW, Steiner decided to wait out his lucrative contract rather than re-sign for WWE. But by 2002, he was finally ready to rejoin Vince McMahon's company. And he was immediately brought in as a big deal and heavyweight title contender. But he was miscast as a babyface, and made to work the long matches favoured by Triple H. The long matches. These left him gassed and exposed his in-ring work, as he struggled to compete with a foot injury. Problems that could have been covered by smart booking and some smoke and mirrors. A later run in TNA rebuilt his reputation for those who were paying attention to the smaller promotion, but for many he is still remembered as a busted flush. I mean, don't tell him I said that though, because I'd like to keep my head on my shoulders. Number 6, Diamond Dallas Page. Diamond Dallas Page was a beloved babyface and Triple Crown champion in WCW. He would go on to have a second life as the creator of DDP Yoga, savior of Jake the Snake Roberts, an all-round IRL good guy. But in between that, he was a fame-hungry stalker who harassed The Undertaker's wife, Sarah. As you do. Naturally, Taker was unimpressed and humiliated Page week after week on television in a heavily one-sided feud. Even Sarah, a non-wrestler, managed a pinfall over Page. Another WCW favourite who decided to sign up to WWE for less money rather than wait out his AOL Time Warner contract. The reward for this most likeable and sympathetic of superstars was being miscast as a creepy weirdo loser. A reboot as a cheesy motivational speaker followed, earning Wrestling Observer Newsletter's Worst Gimmick Award in 2001. Now, Page was also handed a WrestleMania victory and brief reign with the European title. But it was the stalker angle that defined his WWE run. And he was out of the company within a year of his debut. Admittedly, Page is now a WWE Hall of Famer and has returned for cameos. But his year in WWE remains the least fondly remembered of his career. Do you, yes you, want more of this brilliant What Culture Wrestling stuff? Well then tap that subscribe button and you will sign up for exactly that. Number 5, Kenta. By 2013, Kenta was a top name in pro wrestling Noah. A decorated multi-time champion in singles and tag competition. And in 2014, he signed with WWE. In 2019, he was telling Japan's weekly pro wrestling magazine that no good memories come to mind of his time in 205 Live. Yep, things had taken a turn. Like Jon Moxley, Kenta began shooting on WWE after being granted his release earlier that year. And like Moxley, Kenta entered that year's New Japan Pro Wrestling G1 Climax. It is there that their stories diverge. Unlike the, at time of recording, current AEW World Champion, the erstwhile Hideo Itami was already big in Japan before joining WWE. Unlike Moxley, he had an inspiring NXT run dogged by injuries before being squirreled away on 205 Live. And unlike Moxley, his reputation was diminished rather than enhanced by his time in the sports entertainment company. There's a photo of Kenta that you've probably already seen. He stood next to fellow NXT signee Finn Balor in full demon paint. He looks a little bewildered, maybe slightly overwhelmed. It is not a photo befitting of an illustrious former GHC heavyweight champion and star of pro wrestling Noah. It does, however, seem to neatly summarize his time spent in WWE. Number 4, Vader. Leon Vader White was booked as an absolute monster in WCW and New Japan Pro Wrestling. Famously, Stan Hansen knocked his eye right from its socket mid-match, only for Vader to pop it back in and just keep on fighting. His powerbomb gave Sting internal bleeding. His moonsaults looked legitimately terrifying, and he should have been a top heel in WWF in his day, especially given the relatively thin roster at the time. Instead, he fell victim to backstage politicking. Shawn Michaels was apparently less than enamored of Vader's stiff working style. He also upset Vince McMahon by refusing to rebrand his character from Vader to the Mastodon. Booked to lose more often than not, Vader wasn't simply underutilized or overlooked by WWE, he was actively mishandled. His nadir came when he was booked to lose to Kane and then describe himself on camera as a big fat piece of S-word. It couldn't be said that Vader wasn't trying, and he briefly wound up in jail in Kuwait after a misjudged but well-meaning attempt to defend the legitimacy of the wrestling business. He eventually left WWE for All Japan Pro Wrestling and was given one more heavyweight title run. The contrast between champion and piece of S-word could not have been more stark. Number 3, the Road Warriors. Look, Vince McMahon was keen enough on the Road Warriors, or at least their drawing power, to create his own ersatz version, Demolition, in 1987. He booked Axe and Smash as WWF's most dominant tag team and record-breaking tag champs. So you'd think when he got his hands on the real thing, he'd treat them with a bit of reverence, right? Well, first, he changed their name to Legion of Doom in deference to his own Ultimate Warrior. Later, he saddled them with a ventriloquist dummy called Rocco, and the puppet's introduction bombed so hard with the live crowd that a taped segment was never aired. But Vince persevered with the gimmick until Hawk left the company in disgust after SummerSlam 1992. Animal followed soon after to rehab an injury. After a spell in Japan, they returned to WWE in 97 and were later rebooted as LOD 2000, an unnecessary millennial twist on a classic formula. They were then given a new member, Puke, barely more necessary than Rocco. The last of a string of indignities. The team were forced to play out Hawk's real-life substance abuse problems as a WWE plotline complete with phony suicide attempt. As ever, folks, they deserve better. Number 2, Sting. It's hard to shake the pervasive feeling that Sting should have remained the one eternal WCW holdout. The one wrestler of his era who didn't need a stint in WWE to cement his legacy as an industry icon. As loyal to WCW as The Undertaker was to WWE during the Monday Night Wars, Sting continued to hold out when Vince McMahon acquired WCW in early 2001. Like many of WCW's bigger names, he preferred to sit out the remainder of his lucrative AOL Time Warner contract. And given how badly WWE botched the WCW invasion angle, it was probably for the best, right? Post-invasion, others like Goldberg and Scott Steiner did eventually sign with Vince. The original NWO trio of Hogan, Hall, and Nash also returned to the WWE fold. However, Sting preferred to take a different path. Becoming the face of TNA for the next decade might have been a step down from his WCW pomp, but not a bad final chapter for an all-time great's career. Certainly better than what followed. Jobbing to Triple H so that Vince McMahon could once again drive home the point that his wrestling company is better than a long-dead rival promotion. And in just his third WWE match, Sting suffered an injury that forced his retirement, well, for a bit. However, he would return to action in AEW and enjoy the final run he always deserved. Number 1, Dr. Death Steve Williams. Dr. Death Steve Williams was a legitimate hard bastard and decorated All Japan Pro Wrestling star. He also went unpinned in North America for a decade. Add to this a backstage friendship with JR and he was the closest you could get to a sure thing. WWE knew what they had and they weren't about to saddle Williams with a terrible gimmick or hide him away in the mid-card. No, Vince McMahon wanted to build him up as a challenger to WWE champion Stone Cold Steve Austin. They were going to bring Dr. Death in as a star, and they even had a plan for how to do it. Unfortunately, that plan involved the notorious Brawl for All tournament. A shoot boxing tournament both more dangerous and less entertaining than pro wrestling. It also lacked the typical benefits of predetermined contests. McMahon and his cohorts didn't book Williams to win, they just assumed that he would. A second-round knockout loss to mid-carder Bart Gunn saw Dr. Death injure not just a hamstring, but also his reputation and aura. and his name will now forever be associated with one of WWE's worst ideas ever, and that is saying something. Have you enjoyed this What Culture Wrestling list about 10 wrestlers who should never have signed with WWE? Well, then continue your YouTube journey by tapping on this 10 dumb WWE signings we didn't want to admit were genius list too. Oh, it's just as fun. You're in for a ride.